Mira que povo. Fomana. Andre. Agora você viu? É casa? Já pagou assim? Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I didn't know which one you were waiting for me to say. Now I'm clear. All right. So welcome to Level of Proficiency. This is Dagbani, correct? Yes. Very good. And our Dagbani instructor is here, so we will be able to get lots of good examples. So before we close, I'll have him come up. Well, actually, if you can even just introduce yourself briefly.
Okay, I am Adam Peter Azak from Ajumapo. So I'm coming down from Ajumapo to take you the land. So I'm here every week.
You are a celebrity Dagbani teacher. Serious Dagbani teacher. Right. So this class will actually be my last class with you. And what we'll work on is introduction to African languages. So you'll get a lot of background about African languages, what they are, how they sound. And this is the first time we're going to do the slides a little bit differently. And what you'll get a chance to do today is you'll actually hear some of these languages, what they sound like. Alright? Is anyone ready for that?
Yes.
And maybe you'll even get a chance to pronounce some of them yourself. Wonderful. And what you see here, I think we discussed this in our class before, but what you see here is one oral language. Here you see Achiame who are here speaking. And then you see African written language, which is a source for Greek and also a source for Latin that your African ancestors invented. Right? So when we think about African languages, sometimes we only talk about, oh, we spoke and we have oral. But very rarely do we talk about our African written languages. That's a problem. And we won't make that mistake here. But let's go into language itself and start talking about the origins of language. Now there are different theories about language. And the first theory that you need in your notes is called the divine source theory. The divine source. And this comes from the Bambara creation story. Where are the Bambara people located? Oh, you eat their beans, but you don't know where they are. Who here has ever heard of Bambara beans? You know that one. But you don't know the Bambara people. Who here has ever eaten jollof rice? I hope you know the jollof people. Yes. Now you know. Or Fante Kinki. So now you know Fanti people. Well, the Bambara people are located in Mali, right? And for the creation story, we're talking about the origin of language, and that origin of language is built into the story of creation. So they say, creation rose from the void, which was called Fu. Let's say it together. Fu. 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 By the action of Gla. Let's say Gla. 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 Now you'll wonder, well, what is Gla? Well, Gla is the creating but uncreated principle of continuous creation. What? Let me say this again. The creating but uncreated principle of continuous creation. Now the idea is that for African people, many African people, creation isn't something that happened way back as an event and it stopped. For many African people, creation is something that's ongoing. Now how do you know it's ongoing? Because when you and your wife come together, you can create what? A baby. Or you and your husband come together, you can still create. An artist can create. So it means that creation never stopped, that creation is still going on. And that principle of continuous creation is what is known as Gla. So the creating but uncreated means that that principle of creation has always existed, right? Full of its emptiness, and its emptiness full of itself, Gla, by uttering a voice from the void, created its double Dia. So at first you had a void, something like a vacuum, is what we mean, and then Gla was empty. It said, oh, there's so much emptiness around, and it uttered a voice, and it probably said something like, Apadele. I don't know. But its voice now became the second entity, right? So I exist, and there's nothing besides me. When I utter a beautiful name like Apadele, Kamba, which is my own name. Now there are two things, me, myself, and my voice. So now it's a dialectical force. So it said, it created its double Dia, thus endowed life with a dialectical force. Out of Gladia, there came Zo. So those two came together, just like a man and a woman can come together to create a baby. That Gla and Dia came together, the entity of creation and its own voice, which was its double, came together to create Zo, the symbol of human consciousness, and Yo, the symbol of purposive thoughts. From these, the universe was ordered and took shape. So again, in most religions, it appears that there's a divine source which provides humans with language. So the idea of the word, the original word, you find this in African languages and African peoples going all throughout the continent. Right? Very good. Also, we'll give an example of the Dogon people. And this is a Dogon philosopher called Ogo Kubele, who you see here. Right? And he talks about creation according to the Dogon people. Where are the Dogon people located? Also in modern day Mali, where you had those great empires, like the ancient Ghana Empire, the ancient Mali Empire, Songhai Empire. Those people are still there. And they also talk about in their creation story about the word. So they say creation itself is affected by the advent of three successive regimes of speech, which Ogo Tumele, you see here, identifies as the first, second, and third words. Right? So the origin of the word is coming from a divine source. So they say at the moment of creation, the first word covers the nakedness of the pre-existing earth. And the idea for the Dogon is that originally there was no vegetation, there was no life on earth. But that very first life on the earth is metaphorically like the very first word. So nakedness of the earth is like being speechless. But now life coming to the earth is like the very first speech, the very first words. They said the creative spirit is renewed by the advent of the second word, which is associated with the emerging of weaving and the 8 prototypical progenitors of humanity. And those 8 prototypical progenitors are known as the Nomo. Right? And the third word enables human beings to bring into fruition the potential which exists in the first word. So now this is talking about speech as it is produced by human beings. So first is life, right? And then you have the second word, which is renewing it with different types of creations that are coming up secondarily. And then the third word is human beings being able to access that word and produce speech themselves. And you find this concept goes very far back. So as we're talking about these ancient people from those empires, we can also look at ancient Kemet. What is Kemet? Very good, ancient Egypt. But not only the place that is the modern day nation state of Egypt, also going further deeper into the Sudan, the state that we now know as the Sudan. Right? So this is coming from what's called the Shabaka text. And in it says, it talks about Ptah. And Ptah was the creator deity of the people of ancient Kemet. So they say all divine speech happens in the thoughts of the mind and the commands of the tongue. So all works and arts were made, the makings of the 2 hands, the walkings of the 2 feet, the movements of all limbs, in accordance with his command, is referring to Ptah. The speech of the thinking mind comes forth from the tongue and makes the specialization of everything. So Patah, as the creator, was satisfied after making all things, that is all divine speech, or all speech is divine. Right? So again, it's talking about from the creator Patah came this original speech. Right? So this is all coming back to that first theory, what's called the divine source theory, that speech itself must come from a divine source, according to many African people. And we talked about the Shabaka text, and you can see this is that African here, Shabaka, a sculpture of him, a stone sculpture of him. And then this is Patah, who is mentioned here, a bit cut off, but this is Patah, who is also mentioned in that text. Now that first one is divine source. The second one is known as the oral gesture source of theory. So this is an idea that there's a link between physical gesture and orally produced sounds. And they claim that originally a set of physical gestures were developed as a means of communication, right? Then a set of oral gestures specifically involving the mouth developed, in which the movement of the tongue, lips, and so forth were recognized according to patterns of movement similar to the physical gestures, right? So basically, let's give an example. Let's say if I don't know something, I do something like this, right? But now let's say I add a sound to that. If I don't know something, I say, Well, now it can come to a point where I can get that same effect, but I can keep my arms down and just say, And you know that what I mean is, oh, he doesn't know, right? So coming from a place where I'm linking my movements here to my movements here, eventually I can drop all of these other movements and just use these movements here in my mouth. So this is another theory. And you'll see that example here. This is Asamajan after he missed the penalty kick. I don't know why I missed. Alright? Now when we talk about these gestures are very old. How many people are aware that these gestures like this aren't some just new thing that we're doing? Anyone? Anyone? All of you are like, So let me show you to demonstrate. So here you see up top, this is Kanye doing what they call the Kanye shrug. And now you see here Medunetta coming. And what you see here, this has a sound wave of cut, this has a sound wave of and then this is just what's called a determinative to let you know that whatever this is talking about means not knowing. Right? And what you see is these hunched shoulders like this. So it means to know not, to be ignorant of, to be unconscious of, or ignorant. So somehow Kanye doesn't know. And interestingly enough, in languages such as Wolof, that the word for to not know, kamur, that's he or she does not know. If I say kamuma, I'm saying I don't know. It's saying kam, right? If I say kamulu, you don't know. Right? Kamunyu, we don't know. So again, this is some of the work that we mentioned before. Sheikh Anta Diop, the Senegalese scholar, brought forth a lot of these things that you find still in Wolof that you found in the ancient language of Medunetta, which was first written how long ago? Who remembers? Or did I tell you? I didn't tell you. All right. So it dates back to 5,400 years ago, 3400 BCE. Very good. So again, this is a very old written language, but you find us as African people still doing some of these same things. Now let's look at this word, kai. Kai, to think about or to plan. And here, this has a ka, and then the e sound value. And when you see this, it's talking about someone doing this, to think about or plan. So when I'm thinking about something, I may just be sitting here. And if you see me doing this, you say, oh, what are you thinking about? Right? And it's similar to a word in G when I say kai. It would be like to remember something. Again, oh, be kai. Right? So again, those same gestures are used to this very day. Here you see a modern African sitting here thinking about something. Right? Again, another gesture you found, such, to make a libation of the 4-hour water. So here you see someone stooping, kneeling here, and the water being poured here. So So these are just showing you the gestures associated. And you see a woman here in Ghana stooping down, kneeling like this, and throwing a libation as well, right? So these are very old things. And then you see swat, to pay honor and applaud. If you can see this, it's a bit faded, but in the background here is a hand, another hand. This is an applause. The woman is dancing, and this person is doing this. Have you ever seen someone do this type of thing? Yeah. Very good. And here's another hand. You see another hand coming from the side of this person doing this. So if I'm dancing very well, you're doing this as a gesture. Well, this is what you find here as well, to pay honor to or to applaud. So these are very old gestures. So we're talking about the linking of these gestures to, let's say, whenever I do this gesture, I say, hey! And you know, all right, this person is really doing something, but at a certain point, when I want to let the person know they're doing well, I may drop the hands and just say, hey! And the person knows, oh, okay, yes, I'm doing well, I'm doing well. Let's continue. The next theory is called the natural sound or source theory. And this is the idea that primitive words could have come from imitations of the natural sounds that early men and women heard around them. So, for example, when a flying object made a sound like, caw, caw, you may say, oh, look at that, caw, caw, over there, right? So the early human imitated the sound and used it to refer to the object associated with the sound. So these are all different theories, right? Each one is its own theory. And basically the idea is that if this is making a sound like, and I say, okay, this person is doing caw, caw, caw. So I'm imitating the sound of this now with my mouth, right? Or something like kong, 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 kong. Right? So what this thing is making, I can refer to this thing as a kong kong. Right? And I said, oh, bring the kong kong. Or through. Right? So that's the sound of water being poured out of a vessel. So now I can say, well, now this is a word in and of itself. And African languages particularly have a lot of these types of words that are associated with the sounds that something makes. Now, there are critiques to all of these theories. One of this is, well, how would soundless and abstract entities be in a world, how would you refer to them in a language that only has natural sounds? So how would I tell you, go sit down on the, what sound is this thing making, right? But again, this is an idea of, well, perhaps the very first sounds or words started off like that, and then it became more complex, and people say, well, we have a problem with this, so what are we going to call this? Maybe let's combine these sounds, right? Also, an idea that apes and other animals have grunts and social calls, but have not developed the capacity for speech. Now, interestingly enough, research is being done, linguistics, also tying into biologists and others, are looking at some of these different social calls that different apes make. And an interesting study was done in Cote d'Ivoire and Sierra Leone and other places about how monkeys are able to distinguish specific sounds, that they're not just making any sound, that when there's danger above, they make a specific call. When there's danger coming from below, they make an entirely different call. And it makes sense, because if I'm just telling you it's danger and it's an eagle, and you go rushing up to the top, well, your children have just died. Or what if it's a leopard that's crawling up and you're just saying, oh, danger, let me go down, well, you're going to die too. So it makes sense to start differentiating these types of things. And it brings up the question of, well, at what point does the social call end and an actual word begin? Because when it comes to human language, what are we doing other than making these types of distinguishments between father and mother, up and down, danger, safe, right? So we continue. So we look at these types of sounds that are made, and we'll give some examples of this. Does anyone know the name of this bird in G? Dagbani. So we're hearing it saying ba. I didn't hear it say Dagbani, I don't know. But I definitely heard the parts of it, right? So again, this is the idea that perhaps the name of the thing can be derived from the sound the thing is making. You'll find other words that are similar in various African languages. So the word for a chicken or a rooster. So in G, the word for chicken, anyone? Akoko. Or in Yoruba, the word for a rooster is akuko. Right? So the words for the thing is very similar to the sound that this thing is making. Or cuckoo or whatever. Koko, cuckoo, all these types of things. Now, another idea is that original sounds of language may have come initially from natural cries of emotion, pain, anger, joy. Cha! Who said cha? Let's give an example of expression of disgust. I'm the one that you listen to. Right? So again, just this type of interjection, and he continues on. This type of interjection may have been the origin of what later developed into more complex words. Right? So if I hit my toe, I did it. Whatever sound I'm making can be perhaps one of the first words. And now I can start to discuss that first word. All right? Are there examples in any other language that we know of? Expressions of anger, joy, pain, disgust? Don't say child. Very good. So let's say that can develop into a word. So anytime I am disgusted about something, right? Anything else? What sound do you make when you're happy? Oh, you're very happy. What do you say when you're in pain? Right? All right, good. But is there something in Dagbani? Is there a sound in Dagbani for pain or joy that would be something that you can share? Pain or anything? Very good. Good. So that's very clear. And there are other sounds that you can let the person know whether you're feeling happy, whether you're feeling angry at them. So let's say if I'm interacting with someone and I make a sound like, hey! Does that sound like a very friendly sound? No. Right? But what if I make it sound like, oh? Does that sound like I want to fight you? So even the sounds itself, so now if I want a word for loving something, and maybe something that sounds similar to that type of sound, if I want a word for fight, maybe something that's similar to that, something that sounds very aggressive, right? All right, so we continue. There's another theory called the Yogi hole theory. And basically the idea is that the sounds that are produced by people who are involved in physical effort in a coordinated manner could have developed into eventually the very first words, right? So this theory places the development of human language in some social context. So let's give an example. This is from Northern Ghana. So when you do work like that, it doesn't seem like work. It seems like dancing. It seems like fun, right? So basically the idea is that, let's say that the sound that we're making is... So now, this is my first word, right? It says, yeah. But now, whenever I want to talk about, all right, let's go do some work, I say, yeah. Then everyone goes, okay, let's go, let's get our holes, let's go, right? We know what's going to happen, right? So again, the association of that sound that we make when we work with now the work itself. All right? So another theory relates to what's called glossogenetics. Glossogenetics. And this is the idea, it basically focuses on the biological basis, or we can even say physiological basis for the formation and development of human language. So this is the larynx. So evolutionary development saw the development of certain physical features, such as the larynx, that appear to be relevant for speech. So certain features themselves may not have led to speech production, but they are good clues that a creature possessing these features probably had at least the capacity for speech, right? So basically, this is going into what archaeologists would look for, anthropologists would look for, going back to very ancient cultures, civilizations, going back thousands of years, even millions of years. So what you're looking for is, all right, does this creature have a very developed voice box? If it does, it may not have had full speech, but at least had a capacity for speech. So we're looking for, well, when did speech start? It at least needed to be around the time where we had the capacity to produce these complex sounds, right? I hope you're following along. Good. Now, in terms of language, there are two major. Does anyone know that? I can use the word to perform very magical feats. Matter of fact, can I get a volunteer? Any volunteer? I won't saw you in that, no. I like your hair, it's very nice and natural. Very good. This is what you should be doing. Beautiful. All right. All right, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this eraser levitate. That means I'm going to make it float without touching it. All right? So I need help from my assistant here. So what I need you to do, I need you to lift, or actually shift it over slightly. I don't want to touch it myself. No, don't do that. Just shift it over slightly. That's fine. So lift it up 3 times, and then I'll work on my hands. 1, that's 2. Hold it. Okay. All right, clap your hands for me. I made it float without touching it. Thank you very much. Because without the word, I will be limited to just what I can do physically. But now with the word, I've made this thing move. And everyone saw it move, right? Without me touching it at all, right? So some of these things that we just see as, oh, it's just normal, mundane, everyday things, that the word itself is extremely powerful. Because now put this on the level of a pyramid. So I want to build a pyramid. If it's just me and what I can do physically, I may have a hard time. I'm dragging these blocks, but if I can use the word, both oral and written, now I can get everyone to come together in order to build something that's lasting for 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years. So the word is powerful, right? Good, I hope we demonstrated that well. Thank you very much to my assistant here, my lovely assistant, a round of applause. All right, so again, this is talking about the word. Speech itself can help you transcend your own physical limitations, right? Another thing thing that we invented as African people is we invented writing. As you know, 3400 BCE, about 5,500 years ago, right? So writing helps you also transcend space and time. So let's say I'm located here, but if I write this down on this paper, now this message can go all the way to Nigeria, right? So African people invented writing to help transcend space, also time. Because if I wrote this thing down 5,000 years ago, here you are, you come upon it, now you can understand my thoughts, my ideas, my hopes, my ambitions, my dreams, all through transcending space and time through writing. So speech was one African invention, one of the most important inventions in all humanity. Writing was another African invention, one of the most important inventions in the history of all humanity. Also, we were able to transcend space through the drum, right? So one thing you'll notice is that African languages are very tonal, right? Now, if you have a tonal language, you can take advantage of something. If I have a talking drum, that means I can communicate with someone who's a mile away and they'll know exactly what I'm saying. Uko baby abra. Uko baby abra. But I can drum that. So if I'm playing on that drum, someone a mile away can relay that message and everyone knows to assemble right now. And this is one of the advantages of having a tonal language. You'll find that throughout the continent, most African languages are tonal because what they're doing was taking advantage of that technical revolution in communication, right? Very good. So all of these things, when we're thinking about language, you should be thinking about things that your African ancestors gave to all of humanity as inventions. Also, we're transcending space, time, also matter. So if you look at ancient Kemet, they use mummification, and they still use this among African people today. I have a friend who was like, oh, my uncle, he died, but we haven't buried him for 5 years because we're waiting for money for our nephew to come. So they're preserving the body, so it's not rotting away, but they're using these same mummification techniques that were perfected so long ago in order to transcend even matter. So the matter you would think would rot, but we know how to make it such that the matter does not rot. So transcending space, transcending time, transcending matter. When it comes to these inventions, your African ancestors were at the forefront of everything. So we continue. So let us get into the nitty-gritty of today's lesson. How many languages are there in Africa? According to some, around 2,035 languages. Again, that's an estimate. And there was an interesting study that came out about a year or so ago that basically showed a parallel, right? And the parallel was that the longer people have been on the planet, the more genetic diversity that they have, right? What does it mean when we're talking about genetic diversity? What does it have to do with genetics? Say again, genes. Very good. Jeans like how you're wearing there, is that what we're talking about? Jeans? No, your jeans, right? Inside. Very good. So again, the study showed that the people who've been on the planet for the longest tend to have the largest diversity of language, and sometimes the most complex and developed languages as well. That was one. Where it relates to this is that there was also a parallel that those who have the most genetic diversity also tend to have the most linguistic diversity, right? And you can think about it in terms of genetics. Let's say we're on the planet for so long, a few thousand years, now there's a disease that wipes out these people, but not everyone dies because there are certain things in your genes that make you impervious to that disease. So that's a specific gene type. That one goes off, this one stays. Now there's an entirely different disease that wipes out some, but basically the idea of climate change, all of these things would affect your genes over time. So the longer that you're on the planet, the longer time your genes have to adapt to this, to adapt to that. That's your genetic diversity. But then similarly, the longer your language would have to diversify. So it's found that the places that had some of the most linguistic diversity were where? What people have been on the planet for the longest? Who knows? African people, exactly. So that is where they found the largest amount of genetic diversity. But then also, that means that the language had a longer time to develop. So that's also where you have the largest linguistic diversity. Then you also found linguistic diversity where you still find jet black Africans to this day, in places like the Pacific Islands, right? Some of the Australian languages, all those types of places. Now, there was less diversity in places like the so-called Middle East going into Asia, right? There was even less than that going into places like Europe. There was even less than that in places like the Americas, which is said to be one of the last inhabited continents, right? So again, there's less genetic diversity, less linguistic diversity. Now this played a part in terms of the course of history because the people in Americas were wiped out, one, through genocide by Eurasians who went there. Two, they were also wiped out through diseases. So some of the first biological warfare was done against the indigenous people of the Americas. How many of you are aware of that? So one of the things that the Europeans did is that they would take blankets infected with smallpox that they knew was infected with smallpox and give it to them as gifts. And because they didn't have as much genetic diversity, it means that if it kills one, it kills almost all of them. Right? So again, you have less linguistic and genetic diversity in some of these places. Right? So coming back here, this makes up about 1/3 of the world's languages. And they're considered, this is again coming from European linguists, and I'll give you a dissenting view on this, and not everyone agrees with this, and I'll explain why. But for language phyla, you can think about it as a big family. One is the Niger-Congo family, about 1,436 languages. You also have the Nilo-Saharan family, 196 languages. Afro-Asiatic, about 371, and Khoisan, about 35. Right. And we'll show you a quick map to explain these places that we're talking about. So we're talking about Afro-Asiatic. You're looking at these languages here. We're talking about Nilo-Saharan, these in yellow, going into Sudan, Ethiopia, all the way out here to Mali. We are looking at Niger-Congo A. We're talking about these along this line. You see a slightly different color here. This is Niger-Congo B, made of the Bantu languages. Then you find Khoisan here, and then Austronesian here, and Madagascar and some of the surrounding islands. So now let's look at some of the faces and some of the features of these languages. So you find the Niger-Congo family, and it makes up about 1,436 of the world languages, the largest phylum in the world, and comprises about 360 million speakers. That's long. Right? The languages feature contrastive tone systems, nasality, vowel harmony, open, consonant, vowel structures, syllable structures, labial velar sounds such as we. Can we make those sounds? We. Very good. We can do that very easily. All right. Examples of those that are in this file include Wolof, the largest language of Senegal; Fulfulde, spoken in Western and Central Africa; Akan, the largest language of Ghana; Yoruba, Igbo, major languages of Nigeria; Bantu languages, which include Swahili. Is it Xhosa? Can we say is it Xhosa? Is it Xhosa? Is it Xhosa? And this is Zulu as well. Now what we're going to do is we'll let you hear some of these languages. So this is Fulani. It goes by different names depending on the country. So some places it's called Pula, Fulfulde, Fulani, so forth and so on. So let's listen to what it sounds like. cows walking through the streets here in Accra. A lot of the herders are coming from the north, and they tend to be Fulani. It is part of the culture there. Does anyone here speak Fulani? No. I know a few words, Nombata, Jamatan. They are Senegal version of Fulani called Kula, Adjirama, things like that. Now let's look at Kiswahili. So whenever you see that prefix Ki, you know it has something to do with a language. So Kiswahili, Kikongo, so forth and so on. You found languages even in Ghana that have that same prefix to let you know it's a language. So it's a language like Kilichi. So it lets you know it's the language of this. So let's listen to a little bit of that.
Ndio madaraka dei ya kwanza chini ya katiba mpya, vilevile inakuja wakati hali ngumu ya maisha imewasononesha Wakenya mbali na kutamausha na uongozi wa nchi hii. Hivyo ilipofika katika uwanja wa Nyayo kujumuika na viongozi wao kuadhimisha madaraka dei ya 48, fikirani mwao wakitarajia majibu ya masuala muhimu kama vile mzozo wa lini bajeti itasomwa, malumbano ya kuunda kamati maalum kuidhinisha bajeti kuu na deni wake, gharama ya juu ya vyakula na mafuta, na bila kusahau hakikisha kuwa mipaka yetu ni salama, hasa kufuatia mashambulio huko Yale na Turkana kusababisha.
Je, mnasema Kiswahili? Mzee wanasema Kiswahili. Hakuna matata, no worries. Alright? So, Kiswahili is what's called a Bantu language, right? Now there's another Bantu language called Isi-Xhosa that we mentioned already. Isi-Xhosa. Now one thing that's notable about Isi-Xhosa is that it has split sounds. It has split sounds. Now those sounds are not indigenous to the language because there's so many Bantu languages that don't have them. But the thing about Isi-Xhosa is that those speakers are close to other languages that do have split sounds. So they've been influenced by those languages, right? So let's listen to a little bit of what that sounds like.
It's about how they used to test someone if you are coming from South Africa or from another country. So they will ask you to say some words. For example, you know, so if you can't say like and then if you can say slowly, they'll say fast, so you know that is how it works. And then there's a song that says they try to phrase where they meaning the lion, you know, it's more like a chase song, but it goes like this. And it goes on.
Okay, so for your test for African studies, you'll all be producing those sounds. Alright? Is everyone ready? Anyone want to try? Alright. So when you think about it, Isi-Xhosa is said to be in the same family as all the languages of Ghana in terms of the larger Niger-Congo island, right? But it sounds so different because it's been influenced by other languages, right? Now let's look at another language that's very tonal. We talked about these African languages tend to be tonal. And one of the most tonal languages is Yoruba, as an example. And we'll actually get a chance to look at what those tones look like through a spectrograph.
I parun. Ẹ̀bàdàn ló ṣe ìjàgbá lọ́wọ́ yìí nítorí pé tí láwọn ní máa ń sàárẹ̀ wọ́n ní sọ́n jata àjọ jata bóyá ẹ̀jẹ̀ ká dúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ olúwa tó dájú fún gbogbo wá ṣe lórí ìbàdàn ló kọjọ́ òní. Ayé ni ọ̀la ni ìgbà akọ́dà yìí ìgbà ṣẹ̀dá ayé elédùnmọ̀ ìgbà rẹ̀ o àti wáyé ọjọ́ àti òórùn ọ̀sán ọba mákì kùtùkùtù ọba ìdìbò ìgbà elédùnmọ̀ rẹ̀.
So you see, when the tone changes, it changes the meaning of the word. So some of those mean other things if it's a different tone, but the tone itself will let you know exactly what the person is saying. Tone is a Yoruba. Does anyone here speak Yoruba? No problem. Very good. So we're hearing what these different languages sound like. For those of you who've seen Hollywood movies, you may already know, right? So now let's go all the way to Senegal, to Wolof, one of our favorite languages, and listen to what it sounds like. Very good, Joe. Has anyone ever heard of the singer Akon? Yeah. So he's a Wolof speaker. So his father was Senegalese. He went to the U.S. and that's where Akon got all of his rapping, singing, and all that other stuff. So he went back to Senegal to start solo projects and all these other things, and he decided that he wanted to show off a little bit. Yeah, me too, I did. So he's going to speak Wolof. Very good, so that's Wolof. And one thing, I want you to keep in mind what the Wolof sounds like, because there are other languages all the way on the other side of the continent that will sound very similar, right? We'll come back to that. So now we're going to come to Nile Sahara. So Nile Sahara, this is a man and a woman here, TikTok speakers. So 196 languages, spoken mostly in Central Africa, includes what I just mentioned, Dinka, Luo, Kanuri. It has phonemes including implosives and ejectives. This is ejectives like those types of sounds. Also, prenasal consonants such as Alright, so let's listen to the Luo language, Luo. So I hope everyone has your passports and your visa. I'm taking you all around the African continent today. Enjoy the ride. If you want to go to UK, I won't send you there.
Ahmad Wakalima, Alantala Katiru. Woman that I can't do Ali Tula. I know a name that did not give you the kid with two teacher,
So Luo is spoken mainly in Kenya, right? but the sounds of it sound very similar to Wolof. Even the rhythm of it, the cadence of it, and some of the sounds. So some of the words he's saying, they're not Wolof words, but it sounds very similar to the Wolof language. Let's look at Dinka, which is also similar to that one. So the way this language sounds, again, it has very similar sounds to the Wolof. So for me, as someone who understands Wolof, it's like I'm straining to hear, like I should be understanding what you're saying, but it's an entirely different language, but it sounds very similar. So we come to now Afro-Asiatic, 371 languages. This is a man and woman speaker. Mainly found in North Africa, parts of East Africa, and in the Horn of Africa, including Somali, Oromo, Amharic. It has a set of emphatic consonants, variously realized as glottalized, laryngealized, or implosive. It has a VSO typology. This means verb, subject, object. That means if I want to make a sentence, it would be something like eat me food, right? So that's saying I eat food. But instead, it's a different object or a different order. It has a two-gender system in the singular with the feminine marked by the sound T. Also, all Afro-Asiatic subfamilies show evidence of a causative affix C. You find both of these in Medu-Neter as well, the written language. So let's listen to some of them. So this is Somali. So that one seems less intimidating than the clicks, right? Right? But this is a different sound from a different language, right? Also, we have the Oromo language spoken in southern Ethiopia mainly. Somali is spoken where? Somalia, very good. People are paying attention. Spoken mainly in southern Ethiopia. So now we're going to listen to Amharic. Spoken mainly in northern Ethiopia, so it'll be a slightly different sound. I want to see if you can hear the difference. So you can hear the difference? How does it say it to you? Alright, but a slightly different sound, slightly different language, but from the same family. Now we come to some of our favorite languages, some of the most fun languages, the Khoisan languages. So 35 languages spoken mostly in Botswana, Namibia, southern Angola, Zambia, western Zimbabwe, and northern South Africa. These are some of the most complex languages in the world. Okay. So we continue. And you may be wondering why I'm doing a video recording. I'll be going to Egypt as I mentioned, but I'm going to Egypt to present on the use of video in classroom teaching. And since we're using a lot of video, I said what would better explain it than using a video to show me using video. Right? So I'll use probably this in the presentation. Now one thing that you'll notice when we go back to this original chart, let me come back. Oh, let me just give you here. So you see Egyptian, Cushitic, Chadic, Nilo-Saharan, and Nilo-Kordofanian. You may wonder, well, why no Khoisan? Right? That was one of the groups, but you don't see it represented here. Well, actually, this was a theory that was given in 1993, and later genetic evidence actually showed it to be justified, because just about, actually a few months ago, there was a story that came out that was dealing with humanity's forgotten return to Africa as revealed through DNA. So they did genetic tests and showed how all these various African people were related, but the Khoisan had a very different type of DNA. Meaning that these were people who had been very much apart from African people, but then came back into Africa. And this is what this map is showing. So about 65,000 years ago, human beings first migrated, or there are actually a few theories that said that there were at least a couple of migrations, but this one 65,000 years ago, and then about 60,000 years ago, people migrated to Asia. So if you look at that woman who was telling the story in Khoisan, right? If you look at her features and her eyes, it looks almost something like how you would expect a Chinese person to look. But again, we're all coming from the same source. Now, people migrated into Asia about 40,000 years ago, migrated into Europe. Around 45,000 years ago, humans interbred with Neanderthals. This is how you get the European population as you have it now, where their hair looks very similar to the fur of other mammals, right? And their skin tone looks very similar to if you shave a dog or a pig or anything else, you'll see it looks very similar. Well, actually, the genetics show that they interbred with Neanderthals, which is a different type of primate. And then around 3,000 years ago, people came back into Africa. And these are the Khoisan speakers that we're talking about here. And from there, around 900 to 1,800 years ago, they moved further down to where you find them now, the Khoisan people. So Obega was doing his research just based on linguistic evidence. But it came to show that actually the genetics show the same thing, that is so distant because these are people who went out of Africa, stayed out of Africa for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, they're very recent in terms of 3,000 years ago came back then. And it's interesting to note that this 3,000 year period, that's around the time that Africans in Kemet started to open up the borders to Asians. So you find in the Old Kingdom, all throughout the pre-dynastic period, there was always an imperative of black Africans who were living there, the indigenous people of Kemet, just how you saw number. They were always trying to keep the Asians out of Africa. So if you read the original text and scriptures of Winnie, Harku, Sanhat, they're all talking about how we built these walls to keep the Asians out, how we did this policy to keep the Asians out, we went out to smite the Asians. Well, a change in that policy occurred around 3,000 years ago, where Tutmosis III, also known as Djibouti Mess, he started to intermarry with some of these Asians and then started to allow more of them to come in. So that political thing that happened actually had an impact on the genetics inside of Africa. I hope you're following along. Very good. So anyway, when we're talking about the umbrella that all of these modern African groups fall under, that it doesn't include Khorasan because indeed these were people who went out. All these languages were changing together in a family, and then they came back in. Now, when you find the languages in Khorasan spoken mainly here, the reason why it has clicks is because it's very close to these groups, right? So let's continue. So now let's come to common phonological. This is the sound features that you find in African languages. One thing is what's called vowel harmony, where a word with 2 or more syllables has vowels from the same set. So this set, say it with me, E, E, O, U, O. And then you have I, E, O, A. Very good. And the example is like this where avoiding. So you have the A that's coming from here, the O here, O here, did here, right? So again, we have a word that has multi-syllables, but what tends to happen in languages that have vowel harmony, it will choose all of the vowels from either this group or that group. There are some cases where you'll find them mixed, but generally speaking, vowel harmony languages tend to select all from this or all from that. Other common phonological features, you have labial-velar sounds, right? So, implosive, ejective, labial-velar stops, nasal clusters like nka, mpa. Can anyone give me examples from any language that you know? Agbo. Very good. Inga. Good. And it's what? To make. Big. Okay, agbo. Oh, like mami agbo. Big. Very good. In Yoruba, you have the word agbo. And that's a ram. Like the animal, the ram. Agbo. Alright, can anyone give me one that has like a before it cuts out? Nka. Nkrama. Good. Nkatia. Good. I have to come to you. Alright, so I'll try to say it like she said, she doesn't want to get on the mic. Is that okay? Alright, I think I'm very close. Alright, good. So anyway, these are things that you find in African languages that you don't find in languages other parts of the world. Also, syllables, words are divided into a sequence of syllables. Open syllables are common. Open syllables, you're talking about a consonant followed by a vowel, like ko, like ba, ba. Very good. So this CV, consonant vowel, is the most preferred structure. Also, long words tend to have vowels inserted. So instead of saying a sound like school, who can say this? Suku. Very good. And you find that any language this is what people do from various languages. Any language that has consonants that don't go together, if they come across a word that has those consonants together, they will try to put vowels in between. And the example I gave in the last class was when people talk about Kwame and Nkrumah. They can't say the and the K together. They'll say Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah, right? So again, this is something that's very common. If you have these consonants that aren't supposed to go together in your mind or in your language, then when you come across a word that has it, you'll put vowels in between to bring it up. Right? Also, consonant clusters are typically rare, but again, there are nasal clusters such as Nko, Mpa, and Foni. Can anyone think of any other examples? You're on. Good. And then grande is what? You don't know. Ant. Very good. Mkoko. Oh, sorry. What is Mkoko? Plural form for hand. Very good. Anyone else? Here we go. All the way to the back. Yes, please. And more example. Thank you. So we're looking for words that start with the sound, and then another consonant coming after. So call, very good. Let's take it. Very good. Indeed. Thank you very much. Indeed. Wonderful. Or don't eat it. If you just don't eat, I think it will be indeed. Very good. Now another thing that you have is tonology. So most African languages are tonal. They have a high tone, low tone, mid tone. And you can have a combination of high and low, resulting in rising and falling tones. So examples from Yoruba, to get a rising tone, you can have something like ma. Let's say it together, ma. Ma. That's I will. So I want to say ma-lo. Ma-lo. That's how I will go. Right? But then you can also have falling tones, such as in, again, Yoruba, yo. 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 That's he, she, or it, more commonly for it. So I want to say, yo, no. Y'all thinking hip hop, yo. A lot of people from the U.S., when they first start coming to Ghana, it's like, oh, everyone is saying, yo. Like, yo. And they're thinking about like, oh, it's like hip hop. Then you also have a lexical or semantic function to differentiate meaning. So an example of that would be papa. Let's say it together. Papa. Goodness. Papa. Father. Papa. Done. And you have this even more complex in Yoruba. You have one like Ogun. Let's say it together. Good. Ogun. So Ogun is war, but that's different from the deity of war, Ogun. And that too is different from the word for 20 in inheritance. Let's say it together. Ogun. Ogun. But that's not all. There's another word, Ogun. That one is medicine. And that's not all. There's another word, Ogun. That one is sweat. Right? Now, when I first started learning Yoruba, I said, you know what? Maybe I can just speak it without the tones. The tones are difficult. I don't want to have to do all of that. But then I realized very quickly that I need to learn these tones because I learned that the word for farm is Ogo. Let's say it together. Ogo. Oko. And there's a similar word that means something entirely different. And the only difference is a tone. That word is oko. 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 You're thinking, what am I saying? All of the men in this room have oko. Only the men. So I'll let you guess what only the men have. Right? So now, imagine you want to go to the car, but you don't really understand the tone. You say, Oko. You're saying you want to go to the thing that only the men have. It will make people start thinking different things about you. If you're a man, they will think one thing that's not necessarily good there. If you're a woman, they will think something else that you may not want them to think about you. Like, where are you going? So again, the tone is very important because just a slight change in the tone changes the entire meaning of what you're saying. Very good. So that's phonological features. Common morphological features of African languages. You have derivational processes such as the formation of new words, compounding two or more stems to put together or form one word. So a verb and a noun and a noun. You can have different tone patterns and even the tones can change the meaning. So if I say something like Atayisha, or I can say Ahimfie. So these are combining the verb and the noun. So Atayisha being the noun and then Shek being the verb. So that's now clothes wearing, the act of wearing clothes, right? Or Ahimfie coming from Hine, the root Hine to be a ruler, a king, then Fie house. Now, to change the tone, I can say Ahimfie, that's palace. Or I can say Ahimfie, and I can mean one of the houses belonging to a king. So again, just changing the tone slightly can change the meaning of what I'm saying. Right? Then I can also have, in African languages, reduplication, partial or full. This is partial, teacher. So if I'm saying just the chi and the che, so the full form is chi. In front of it, I'm just doing the chi part, and it's only part of the larger word. Or I can have the full, boo-boo. Let's say it together, boo-boo, boo-boo. And I can also have triplication, pa-pa-pa, do-do-do. Right? Yeah. Very good. So doing these things can serve different functions. It can make it even more of something, right? Or it can be doing the same thing multiple times, like in the case of boo-boo. Or so many times, boo-boo-boo-boo-boo-boo. And basa. Basa. Very good. And then we come to language contact phenomena. So an example of that is the transfer of clicks to the Bantu languages like Xhosa. Now one of these things is diglossia, and this is used to describe any situation where two different languages or varieties of the same language are used and spoken in everyday life in a speech community, but where one is considered more prestigious than the other. One is considered more prestigious than the other. Can someone give me an example of something like that? Two languages in the same community, but people see one as being better or more valuable than the other. This is talking about language attitudes. Anyone? An example of that? Alright, let's say for example, you have a place where perhaps Guan is spoken and Fante is spoken. And people would see, oh, one of them I think is better than the other. So it's just an attitude. It doesn't have anything about the intrinsic value of the language itself, but what do the people think? Oh, I don't want to learn that one, let me learn this one. Right? Or a place where English is spoken and perhaps T is spoken, and people see one as being more prestigious than the other one. Right? Of course, in this case, the T will be more prestigious than English. Right? Yes, no. All right? So an example, English language vis-a-vis ethnic languages or vernacular languages, so-called. Code switching. So this is the ability of a speaker to switch from one language to another language. So an example would be what? Who can give me an example of code switching? You didn't want to say. Oh, I said I want you to give me an example of switching from one language to another language. Why don't you do English? Very good. Right? Tapi boleh sampai ni saya mau bagi soal di Yoruba. Kenal dulu nak, menawa anak yang ciora. I said it's me can cheat. It's my sister Jesus. So I'm switching from one to the other. This one, and now back to English. So this is an example of code switching, right? Usually it's when you're thinking about the person is saying an entire sentence or longer, and then they switch the conversation. The next paragraph is in this language, the next paragraph is in another language, right? Another example, pigeons, right? So these emerge when several groups with different languages and no common lingua franca are compelled to communicate in the presence of a newly arrived dominant language. So an example of that, West African Pidgin English, and even within that you have smaller, within the country, this country's Pidgin will be different from that country's Pidgin. Swahili Pidgins, East Africa, you have an example? Alright, so again, when we're talking about Pidgin languages, it's like, okay, I speak Akan, you speak Ghana. We don't need to communicate, but now we're forced to. So because now we're forced to communicate to do perhaps a job as a clerk or whatever, now we just need to use this new language that's not my native language, but just to do a transaction. Make a go job. Right? As soon as I'm done with that, then I go back to speaking my own language in my house. You go back to speaking your own language. We're only interacting for very limited purposes, usually to do some type of transactions. Alright? But now, from that, Creoles can be born. And a Creole language is when a Pidgin becomes the first language or mother tongue of a generation of speakers and becomes elaborate in terms of vocabulary and grammar. So now let's say we were doing something like make a go job, just to interact. But now our children, that's all they know. They don't know the G, they don't know the Ga. All they know is make a go job, but now they need to talk about other things. Right? So now they need to elaborate, they need more elaborate vocabulary to do that. When they talk about the weather, make I go job alone isn't going to talk about what the rain is coming. It's not going to talk about we need to plow this earth over here. So now we need to use this language in all the domains. Right? So example, Mauritanian French Creole used in Mauritius and Madagascar. Yes. So you have Nigerian Pidgin English, but that one is now starting to develop into a Creole because you have people in places like Lagos where that's all they are born speaking. Right? They may not go to school, they may never learn formal English, quote unquote, but they know how to speak this one. And then one parent may come from Yoruba land, one parent may come from Igbo land, and they don't get either of those. So what we're seeing right in front of our eyes is the development of a Creole. Then multilingualism. That's the norm in Africa. You have individual multilingualism, and that's the example I gave you before, where an individual in the speech community speaks more than 2 languages, right? So it may be an anomaly that not, let's say people in the class, how many people speak Chi? Okay. How many speak Dagbani? I caught you. You're lying. Okay, we'll see. Alright? But let's say me, I speak G. But how many people speak Yoruba here? Alright? So this is something that's not cutting across the entire society. How many here speak Wolof? Or Kiswahili? Or Kikongo? Right? Or Portuguese? So in this instance, it will be, all right, that individual speaks different things than we speak. But now you can go to a different community where in the community everyone speaks one. And in addition to one, everyone speaks Fanti. Right? So that's now across the entire society. It's not something out of commonplace for everyone to speak both of these. Then in addition to that, they may all speak English as well. So that's now on the scale of the entire society, everyone does that. Right? And this is now where we're talking about societal multilingualism, where multilingualism is not only functional or commercial, but comes across the whole social fabric in the speech community. Right? So, for example, everyone here speaks Ewe and English. Right? That's an example. Now, finally, you have an assignment. Yay! Was that good? The tones changed the whole reading of the thing, right? So, you're going to work on what roles do Ghanaian languages play in education in Ghana. And the assignment is for you to comment on the language policy of education in Ghana from 1529 to 2002. You have a reading that's going to assist you with that. You won't have to just think it off the top of your head. So there's a document you can download online for free. The language policy of education in Ghana. A critical look at the English-only language policy of education by Charles Owuerie. Death has come to an end, is his name. Owuerie. All right? So you have until next Friday. That's the meeting of this class next week. You can either drop it off to me. You can send it at room 115 in African Studies. Send it to my email, obkamban@ug.edu.gh, or you can turn it into your teacher, and we'll work out how to get it to me. So you have 1 week. This is part of your grade, of course. So I hope everyone learned something new today. Yes. So now you'll be walking all around campus and people will know you took African Studies today. Because they'll say, ah. Very good. And I hope this is also helping to kindle an interest in African languages, right? So throughout the continent we have so much variety and diversity, but at the same time, we have a core foundation from which all of them arise, right? And once you understand that and know that, it'll make learning another African language so much easier, because when you know the Sa and G, then you go to teach here, you'll see the Ta in there and you'll know what it is, or the Ta in Yoruba and you'll know what it is. And then you'll see anytime you see the Sa here, you'll find the Ta there, and it will become very easy to learn. So for me, I learned Chi before, I learned Kiswahili before, I learned Yoruba. But once you know one, it will help you learn so many others. And it'll just become easy. All right? And I hope everyone has come to an understanding of how important the word is. And I hope my magic trick was able to help you understand that too, right? Very good. So these things that we just take for granted, they're able to do very powerful things. And that's what your African ancestors have given to the world. Okay. These are some of our references that we covered today. And in conclusion, thank you, Madame Asiye, Wala Doma, Kwekaka, Aya, Yereje, Yabe, Borgoma, Aya. The shade is actually Sana Makoto Magi. Thank you very much. Amen. And amen is a deity from ancient Egypt as well. I hope you know that today. You don't know? Oh! That's the reason why you say the word amen. I should go back. The reason why you say the word amen is because that was one of the most powerful deities in ancient Kemet. Sometimes referred to as Amen Ra. I'll write it for you. Amen.